You're listening to the Choice FM, where it doesn't matter where you come from, but where we can go together. The show will start in a moment. Hello, and welcome to the Choice FM podcast for February 2nd, 2018. I'm FD Gifford, and I will be your host for the next 25 minutes. Now, if you are new, I hope you'll find this show will soon become a favorite and you get value out of our regular broadcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you will be notified of our next release. As you may or may not know, the Choice FM is my primary broadcast vehicle and is hoped to be a key part of the YWNH Media Company. Those of you who are new to the community, this show is intended to be distributed at least once a week, more than likely more often, and I plan to cover the important topics of our time and how they impact our daily life and lifestyle from a health and wealth perspective. The Choice FM content is a combination of reporting news and information as found and determined by the show's editors, along with their review and commentary. I invite you to join me each episode, share the broadcast with your friends and family, post comments, and maybe join me on air as a caller or a guest. Now let's kick off the show. Today, I wanted to share with you my take on a few top headlines in healthcare or the small business sector in the news. I selected healthcare this week for two reasons. Well, first of all, healthcare has been the focus of my career most of my life. But more importantly is what I found this week, and I'm titling this show, A New Hope for Small Business Health Plans. After suffering early defeats in the U.S. Senate, the administration moved to make good, as best as it could, on repeal and replacement of Obamacare campaign promise. Given failure to support the president by several rogue Republican senators, the usual McCain, Collins, etc., the president issued an executive order titled, quote, "The Presidential Executive Order Promoting Healthcare Choice and Competition Across the U.S." Within this order, there are three areas to address to make necessary reforms to PPACA, that is the official name of Obamacare, as written and regulated by the prior administration. In my opinion, the most significant among them was the first issue, which states, large employers often are able to obtain better terms on health insurance for their employees than small employers because of their larger pools of insurable individuals across which they can spread risk and administrative cost. Expanding access to AHPs can help small businesses overcome this competitive disadvantage by allowing them to group together to self-insure or purchase large group health insurance. Expanding access to AHPs will also allow more small businesses to avoid many of the PPACA's costly requirements. Expanding access to HAPs would provide more affordable health insurance options for many Americans, including hourly wage earners, farmers, and employees of small businesses and entrepreneurs that fuel economic growth. Next, I would say that the section on the HRAs is important, as directed the Secretary of DOL to enhance and expand the use of health reimbursement arrangements. The order reads as follows. HRAs are tax-advantaged, account-based arrangements that employers can establish for employees to give employees more flexibility and choice regarding their health care. Expanding the flexibility and use of HRAs would provide many Americans, including employees who work at small businesses, with more options for financing their health care. Now, I've long promoted the expansion of HRAs and believe that they will become more and more significant in the years to come. And here are my top three reasons. One, health reimbursement arrangements, HRAs, are both employer and employee flexible. Two, HRAs can facilitate health plan portability. And three, HRAs reduce the administrative costs for employers. Now, the executive order announcements attracts many political responses. It didn't take long for the Watchers of Washington regulation to begin their analysis of the order. some to learn how it will positively impact businesses, and some to find ways to, quote unquote, resist change to this administration, and specifically the Obamacare agenda. For example, if you look back to October when the president signed this executive order on health care, you will find many articles that appeared pessimistic on its goal in order to achieve this goal. I found this article to be a good representation of their pessimism. The article was written by R. Pepper Crutcher, Jr., and is titled, Association Plans Someday Maybe. It goes like this. The October 12, 2017 executive order promoting healthcare choice and competition across the United States get things rolling, but this ball will have to roll uphill for months before it can roll downhill. And here's why. Continuing on, the meat of this matter is in subsection 2 of the order. In that section 2, the expanded access of association health plans, you know that AHP I was talking about? Well, the order says, within 60 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of Labor shall consider proposing regulations or revising guidance consistent with the law to expand access to health coverage by allowing more employers to form AHPs. To the extent permitted by law and supported by sound policy, the Secretary should consider expanding the conditions to satisfy the commonality of interest requirements under the current Department of Labor advisory opinions. Interpreting the definition of an employer under Section 5 of the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. The Secretary of Labor should also consider ways to promote AHP formation on the basis of common geographic or industry. The reference to ERISA provision says that employers means that any person acting directly as an employer or indirectly in the interest of an employer in relation to the employment benefit plan, and includes group or association of employers acting for an employer in such a capacity, end quote. I have no dispute with the authors representing the challenge facing the Secretary upon this executive order, and fully understand the complexity of ERISA regulations. After all, I spent 30 plus years as an employee benefit and compensation executive for large corporations. And the following citation frames the rules relatively well, in my opinion. They are constantly changing, and you need to learn to adjust your sails as sailors do to the wind. For example, in this article, the author offers this, quote, historically, the DOL has taken the view that a controlled group of corporations may have a group health plan that's regulated in the same way a plan sponsored by a single business entity, but that plans sponsored by multi-employers and self-employed individuals, not commonly controlled, must comply with relatively stringent and punitive rules for, quote, multi-employer welfare arrangements, also called MIWAs, which are subject to both ERISA and state health and care insurance regulations, even if they are self-insured by the sponsoring employer group, unless participating employers are contributing to the plan under contracts with a labor union. Union-created multi-employer plans are favored in ERISA and DOL rules. And he gives a citation. Yep, just because the DOL historically viewed MIWAs in one way does not mean that that is the only way. Here's an unofficial DOL summary of the dilemma. The Department of Labor has taken the position that a bona fide group or association of employers would constitute an employer within the meaning of ERISA for purposes of having established and maintained an employee benefit plan. Continuing on, however, unlike the specific treatment of a controlled group of employers as a single employer, there is no indication in Section 340, subsection 40, or the legislative history accompanying the MIWA provisions that Congress intended that such groups or associations be treated as single employers for purposes of determining the status of such arrangements as a MIWA. Moreover, while a bona fide group or association of employers may constitute an employer within the meaning of ERISA, the individuals typically covered by the group or association's sponsored plans are not employed by the group or association and therefore are not employees of the group or association. Rather, the covered individuals are employees of the employer members of the group or association. Accordingly, the extent that a plan sponsored by a group or association of employers provides benefits to the employees of two or more employer members, and such employer members are not part of a control group of the employers, the plan would constitute a MIWA within the meaning of Section 340. Here's the highlight. Multi-employer welfare arrangements under the ERISA Guide for Federal and State Regulations on page 22 of the Department of Labor Income Benefits and Security Administration, revised August 2013. State-by-state MIWA regulations make operation across state lines quite difficult. That's the main problem, which we think the President has told the DOL to fix. Our guess is based partly on statements made by Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, the primary mover of this situation. His October 12, 2017 article published in Breitbart began, "President Trump will today legalize and allow individuals to form health associations and purchase insurance across state lines. But today, legalized and allow may be premature." As the author suggests, but I disagree, this disruptive executive action will draw heavy and sustained fire. Opponents may argue that current DOL opinions is only the reasonable reading of ERISA and relevant provisions, and that any change requires ERISA to be amended by Congress. Okay? Given this resistance movement against such everything the President or his administration proposes, it is not much of a stretch to predict charges of adverse collateral consequences of the policy change. Even dark alley threats and or legal disputes, as they call them, and penalties for flagrant violations of MIWA rules, including jail time, will be thrown at the President. Yes, we'll be watching, but I think the resistors will be holding their breath. Now, it is important to note that earlier in January, the Department of Labor actually launched the proposed rules as ordered by the executive order in October. Let's take a look at that process as covered by the news and released by the DOL. Here's what I found in the New York Times. Quote, "By joining together, the Department of Labor said employers may reduce administrative costs through economies of scale, strengthen their bargaining position, and obtain more favorable deals, enhance their ability to self-insure, and offer a wider array of insurance options." That's coming from the New York Times, by the way. From another source, the Department of Labor newly issued association plans proposed regulations include welcome changes for employers, but would benefit present state regulation, but would present state regulatory challenges. This is by Alden Bianchi from his law firm. Reading from the article, on January 3rd, 2018, the Department of Labor issued proposed regulations that will make it easier for small employers to band together to form association health plans, or AHPs, thereby providing access to more liberal underwriting and other rules governing large employer groups. This post continues for the content of summarizing and going over the proposed regulations, and here's what I found. Providing background. The association health plans are programs providing health coverage, typically within an industry organization or businesses that share an affinity or common interest. For example, a local or regional chamber of commerce may offer an association-type plan to its members. Under current law, small groups generally retain such status as such even where a coverage is purchased through an association. Since AHPs are typically marketed to and purchased by small employers, AHPs are usually subject to more restrictive state small group insurance ratings and other rules. At the heart of the debate over AHPs is the extent to which small employer groups can band together to form large groups to take advantage of more favorable underwriting and other rules, end quote. Continuing on, the article notes, quote, the proposed AHP regulation was proposed by the executive order issued by the Trump administration, and administration ordered the Department of Labor Secretary to consider proposing regulations to revising guidance consistent with the law to expand healthcare coverage, as I said before, to the extent permitted by law, supported by sound policy. The Secretary should consider expanding conditions that satisfactorily solve the commonality of interest requirements under the current Department of Labor advisory opinions, interpreting the definition of an employer under Section 3 of ERISA, and the Department of Labor Secretary should also consider ways to promote AHP formation on the basis of common geography or industry. In response, the proposed regulation modifies the definition of the term employer in Section 3, subsection 5 of ERISA. Under ERISA, group health plans that cover employees of two or more unrelated employers are referred to as multi-employer welfare arrangements, or MIWAs. AHPs are, by their nature, MIWAs. The proposed regulation would, among other things, modify the commonality of interest test, while at the same time continuing to distinguish employment-based plans, the focal point of Title I of ERISA, from mere commercial insurance programs and administrative service arrangements marketed to employees. This is not just an insurance plan, these are association plans. For a MIWA to be subject to ERISA requires that the arrangement be ERISA-covered health plan, which means, among other things, that the MIWA is sponsored by a group of employers. Thus, how ERISA defines an employer is of vital importance. The proposed regulations are aimed at fully insured arrangements, although the Department of Labor has invited comments on how the rules might be applied to self-funded or self-insured arrangements. ERISA defines the term employer to mean any person acting directly as an employer or indirectly in the interest of an employer in relation to the employee benefit plan, and includes a group or association of employers acting for an employer in such a capacity. The Department of Labor has consistently taken the position in advisory opinions that for a group or association to constitute an employer, its group must satisfy two criteria. There must be a bona fide group or association of employers acting in the interest of its employer members to provide benefits for its employees. There must be a commonality of interest, and the association members must themselves exercise control, both in form and substance, over the activities and operation of the plan. Now, under current law, it goes on, the AHP established and operated by a commercial promoter would not be an ERISA-covered MIWA, nor, because of the commonality of interest requirement, would a group of employers that banded together for the sole purposes of offering group health coverage. The proposed regulation would not change this result in the case of commercial operator, but it would permit a group of small employers to band together and make health plan coverage available to employees. Under such current law, working owners of an incorporated or unincorporated trade or business with no other common law employees, other than maybe spouses, are not employers and are precluded from participating in an ERISA-covered MEWA as a result. The proposal would change this result. Small employers are attracted to AHPs because they will be regulated as large groups, and the Affordable Care Act, AAC, imposed a series of protections under the heading of insurance market reforms, which apply with equal force to the individual market and the small group markets. These include protections for individuals with pre-existing conditions, but the ACA also imposes certain requirements that apply only to individuals and small insurance products. These include essential health benefits, a risk adjustment program, guaranteed issue and renewability, single risk pool, and modified community rating. All of these terms and programs included in the ACA are too complex and require too much time than we have allowed in this episode, and will be included in part 2 of this 2-part series on association health plans and the proposed rules by the Department of Labor. And that program will be titled The Benefits of an AHP or Association Health Plans for Small Businesses. Now, to summarize what we have learned so far about the administration's attempt to fix Obamacare, let me recap. The President signed an executive order back in October directing the DOL to make a proposal within 60 days to expand access to association health plans, the AHPs, through regulations or revising guidance consistent with the law, by allowing more employers, specifically small business employers, to form AHPs to the extent permitted by law and sound policy. This order knowingly focused the DOL on the issue of commonality of interest, advisory opinions, and the interpreting of the definition of an employer under ERISA. Based on this order, and now the release of the proposed rules by the DOL, it is clear the DOL has found a way to expand the existing use of multi-employer health plans under ERISA, known as MEWAs, which up to now have only been favored by labor unions and not small business associations. Specifically, I quote, "The department has taken the position that a bona fide group or association of employers would constitute an, quote, employer within the meaning of ERISA's Section 3, subsection 5, for purposes of having established or maintaining an employee benefit plan," end quote. The proposed rules exclude commercial insurance plan membership arrangements, while focusing the regulations on fully insured arrangements, while also inviting, quote, comments on how the rules might be applied to self-funded plans, end quote. This is a great first step towards empowering small business owners to establish larger risk pools under these new association health plans, leveling the regulatory playing field with larger employer health plans under ACA. Once established, these new small business MEWAs should also be able to develop self-funded arrangements as well to further lower the cost of health insurance for small business marketplace. Well, that's a wrap. I hope you got some value from this and that you might visit my site at ywnhmedia.com. The music we use at The Choice FM comes from zinmusiclibrary.com. We're recording this podcast today at the beautiful Carolina coast. All rights reserved, ywnhmedia.com. Have a great day.